Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Default Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and remote work experts from all around the world. Our guest today is Matt Heiman, founder and CEO at the Game Day. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Vit. I appreciate the invitation.
Matt, before we start, can you provide our listeners with a brief overview of your career journey from your beginnings in banking in Toronto to your current role as a founder and CEO of the Game Day?
Sure. Well, thanks for the broad opening question. Actually, my career started in Winnipeg as a teenager, printing T-shirts and teaching tennis lessons to put myself through university. So I started off as an entrepreneur, and then realized that I probably should try and get a proper job after I left university to sort of keep up as much as anything with my peer group. And through a couple series of jobs, I ended up pursuing a job in finance in Toronto. One, because I enjoyed the mix of kind of numbers and analytical side of banking, and then also the helping kind of people build businesses or access finance for growth was really compelling to me as an entrepreneur. And the third thing is just got to see the world through a very privileged position, and I was lucky to get that job. And I think the piece that I took with me, kind of being the extremely low man on the totem pole at the Royal Bank of Canada, was the kindness and intelligence of the people I worked with. It even makes me, emotional now thinking back to it, how little I knew and how much time they had for me and how much knowledge they had. Some of these people then went on to run one of the largest financial institutions in the world. So I think the kind of pickup there that I had was less around maybe the transactional skills, which were it took me from zero to my peers wouldn't say 100. They maybe give me a 7 or 8 on 10, or 70 or 80 out of 100. But I think on the soft skills and just the understanding of what it takes to make an organization tick at a very high level, that became very clear to me. The second thing that was helpful in my career is that organization actually had an opening for one person in the entire group to come to London. And what happened then is I took the skills that had been kind of gifted towards me or hard earned, depending on how you view it, in those first couple of years, and come to London with that, and then deploy that to a different client set, different group of people I was working with, and in a different country, a different culture. And that was a really privileged position because instead of entering as the lowest man with no skills, I was at least entering at a mid-level with highly relevant and well-earned skills, but in a very, very narrow band of knowledge. Kind of bringing those two together, I remember my first interview with a guy who now actually runs capital markets for the Royal Bank of Canada worldwide. Extremely smart guy, going through the typical analyst questions in a small room at a small university, hoping to get another interview. And he asked me the question we all know the answer to, which is, what will you do at the end of this 2 year on ramping banking career? And the right answer undoubtedly is, I'll go get my MBA at some fancy university, or I'll work my ass off and never need to go back to university and become a superstar. I chose path three, which had never been trodden before, which is, I'll take those skills and go start my own business. And he looked at me and said, I had to deliver it to the right guy. He said, "I've never heard that answer before." And I thought to myself, this is it. He's just gonna frog march me out of the room. And he said, everything you've said so far was the same answer everyone else has given me, and I've done hundreds of these interviews. I'll do. He said do something like 25 of them today. Uh, but he said, I now know those answers were honest because everybody knows how to answer the question you just answered, and you gave me an honest answer. So you'll get another interview. I thought to myself, this is remarkable. First of all, that the guy can guarantee me another interview. I thought he was overstepping, but second, that he so valued that I was speaking from my heart rather than my head. So I guess the moving then into being an entrepreneur, which is really what I was working towards, is I worked then for a smaller bank, then met more entrepreneurial organizations, really founder-led businesses that really inspired me, particularly in media and technology, which are two sectors which I believe are founder growth industries, and they're really exciting. And so I got to kind of like test those skills and really put them to work with entrepreneurs who weirdly kind of kept trying to recruit me to their team. Um, and one of my mentors, even way back in my first ever deal I did in like '97, she had to keep the wolves from the door from hiring me into a group that I wasn't interested in working for, to be perfectly clear. I was just into a new job. But the way through, if I met entrepreneurs, they really did want to kind of have me as part of the team. It's a DNA, it's sort of part of your DNA you can sense in other people. And then I started a business with one of the clients. Did really well. Moved that through to from being in mobile phone industry into mobile content industry. Sold that business in 2008. The same year, had a partner in that company who had been great and run America for that business. He and I started another company called Diagonal View. Diagonal View, we then ran through and became one of the largest content companies in the world in terms of online media, maybe the largest, hard to know. And we sold that to Sky in 2017. Then I had an earnout for a couple of years. I was blocked from being in the media space, so I started a luxury company, which we'll talk probably a little bit about, and then got back into media, but in New York, with a group who we handpicked to hire during COVID. We had the privilege of being able to hire wherever and whoever we wanted because we had a kind of good run of it in our previous business. And so we made some key hires and started in 2020 in US online media, which is extremely competitive, sports media, which is even more competitive, and that morphed into sports betting media, which is even more competitive. So we are the thin edge of the wedge. And you could, from a high level, call it the right place at the right time. But, it is a dogfight, and we cherish every moment of it.
Okay, but conventional wisdom often advises entrepreneurs to focus on, this single niche or industry. However, like you have, I guess, successfully branched out into various sectors like banking, like I said, sports betting, media, and even this luxury handbags. So you're clearly not opposed to diversifying stuff, so could you maybe share some strategies or principles that have constantly helped you succeed across different businesses in different niches and industries, I guess, yeah, for our listeners who are are keen on to replicate your success no matter what niches they're working on. Could you maybe provide some quick checklists or must do's or the key principles that should keep in mind?
Okay, thanks, Bit. That's an interesting question. I think it's very well thought through because you're right. I have a variety of experiences, but have managed to have a degree of success at least in a number of different places. And I guess the main piece I see is that every industry probably has several flaws, but at least one. And if you can hone in on trying to create value or find out in the value chain where optimal value could be created by change, then you can probably create yourself an opportunity and then a challenge, and then ultimately, hopefully, value creation. If it's a sustained challenge throughout the industry and you hold some key part of that is an ongoing step change, then yeah, you're going to end up having something of value that a larger organization or a complementary organization is going to want a piece of. So I think if I kind of back up, I think where that maybe was interesting, less so in my early career. I was just like, sort of swimming to keep my head above surface. But then what I could see, probably when I moved to London, because I had some skills, I was having to swim less hard. I was a bit more flotational, and I could sort of have a bit of a broader view. I could see for me, in terms of an industry I wanted to be a part of, it would be media or technology. Telecommunications was a natural third, if you imagine TMT, but to me, it was just kind of big industry. So if you imagine the scale of knowledge based industries versus capital based industries, I would always kind of hone in on the knowledge based industries because I think there's a better chance for a mind to create value. On the other side, capital based industries require a lot of money, and the money will ultimately dictate who the winner is. So for me, telecoms required a lot of capital and maybe weren't for me. So, media or technology, by background, I wasn't a technologist. Although, when you start to get in deep into Excel, you do start to do fairly rudimentary programming. And so I could kind of understand the basics towards writing programs to make calculations and repeated calculations hell of a lot easier. I understood conceptually where that stood, but I didn't think I had the validity on the technology side. Going back to pre first job, my degree was in English and economics. And so I really did understand how media had changed over the last 200 years, particularly. I'll ask a lot of people, like, how was the novel invented? They won't have a clue. Ask a person how the Italian language was affected by television. They won't have a clue. Whereas for me, that's like foundational knowledge that you can build on to have a sort of a thesis of where media might go as it transitioned online. And so I think if I can kind of hone in on the next person who kind of hit the nail on the head, it's a guy who now weirdly runs weird to me, probably not that weird to the rest of the world, but because I've known him so long, it's weird to me that he now runs Sequoia, which is this big venture capital firm. He's kind of like just done a good job, kept working hard, obviously hit some winners, well liked guy, and now he runs the organization. In '08, when I was looking to either get funding for or sell my first business, he said to me, Matt, what we love about you is you just constantly think about how to get someone to click on your content and not someone else's on a mobile phone. And I thought to myself, like, that's the most reductionist thing I've ever heard in my life about a human being. But on the other hand, he probably has an investment committee that needs like a one liner, and that is a superb one liner. And so, I'm kind of painting him as a good salesperson, but on the other hand, very perceptive. And then painting that third piece around, what's the value going to be in terms of value creation? Obviously, immense if you can be that person. And so, what that statement did, and at the time, I was working with like a Murdoch here and the former chairman of Warner Music there, and et cetera, et cetera. So it wasn't unusual to have a high profile conversation, but he really stuck the flag in. And I thought to myself, yeah, he's actually right, which was a bit humbling. And the second thing is, it's come about totally naturally. And the third thing is, I love it. And so if you imagine really whether it's mobile content, which was Mobix, which we then sold in '08 rather than getting funded by Sequoia, or it was Diagonal View, which is making video content that was competing with other video content on massive platforms like YouTube, where we became probably the most successful studio in the world, or now moving into the incredibly competitive world of online sports and online sports betting, keeping that absolute blinders on, is this content more clickable than the other guys, is kind of what I brought through. And then I think the perceived outlier would be luxury handbags. But the truth is, if you went down the street and said, hey, would you like this handbag? And it was a Gucci bag, someone would probably say, oh my God, yeah. So we've found the most clickable thing for a lot of people in the world. You already know it's highly sought after. What you now need is an online vehicle, which makes it accessible. And so I think actually the same thing kind of like runs through as a true line throughout the last 15 to 20 years of my career.
And I notice your journey has some sort of similarities to Gary Vaynerchuk's journey. I'm pretty much know. I guess you know who is that guy. Starting small and scaling into media, then into sports, then investments. But I guess you went a step further by entering this betting industry and starting this the game day, right? Which is from what I know is kind of reshaping how people engage with sports. So, and my question is, what inspired you to launch a platform like the Game Day, and how is different from other betting platforms?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's two really big points of differentiation. First is the co-founder and I, so Steve and I, sold our last business to Sky, which is the largest broadcaster in Europe. At the time, we were the largest the largest voice in Premier League and Champions League video in the world between YouTube and Facebook. We're number one in both, which really took us to quite an elevated place in terms of monthly viewership. So we got very good in a very competitive space, but weren't making that much money. And so, to answer your question, how did we end up in sports betting in America? The transition piece there that's forgotten about is we got bought by a very smart, very large company that said, actually, rather than just entertaining these people with this amazing content, what we'll do is get them to start thinking about how to make a bet or to talk about betting to that massive audience. Actually increased our audience because that audience was very, very interested in it. We just hadn't explored it. Painful in retrospect, because it comes along with huge amounts of money. It's basically, sport is driven by betting, and so we had a blind eye to that commercial opportunity for a good long time. It's not like we were babes in the woods. We'd taken a little money along the way. We just didn't realize that that just a little tweak could make that much difference. So credit to the acquirer, and I lived through that transition and loved it. It was really, some of those people were the first phone calls that I made about setting the new business up, and so looked at America and thought, you know what, we can do this. We're the right guys to get the audience. We now know where the money sits. It'd be silly not to take it on.
And in one of your previous interviews, you emphasized the importance of choosing the right market with real money in it. You touched this a bit, but sports betting in the US is evolving rapidly, and it is clear that it's growing market, no doubt here. But what about this your another business, this handbag subscription platform, right? Frankly, I used to have this handbag e-commerce store, but I never thought that
Ah,
this business could be in on par with media or betting, for example. So with that in mind, I'm curious to know how exactly do you identify the right market that, as like you said, has real money in it? Do you have specific maybe checklists that you can share with our listeners?
sure. Yeah, I think that. And this is where I do have a lot of discipline, and in that my worlds do cross over. Got trained in sort of the basics of spreadsheet jockeying, and did that for a couple of years. So yeah, it has to work to me, and that's both a benefit and a something that holds me back. Right? If you're going to launch a crypto exchange, you don't need the numbers to work. You just need to be the loudest, shoutiest guy in the room at the right moment in time, and people throw money at you. So those aren't the businesses that I can engage with emotionally, because to me they don't have an economic either benefit or return. And so um, lots of people can. Lots of people have made fortunes at that. I personally believe that those businesses won't be heard of or recognized in 5 to 10 years' time, for good reason. They're just not sustainable, real things. And so what I need to see is an economic model that works. And the piece that works for both of the businesses you mentioned, so the game day in the US being one, is that probably 100 million people will sign up to place a bet in the next 5 years. Each of those customers is worth about $350. So that's $35 billion in transactional value that'll go to a marketing company. Now, some of them will learn about it through newspaper adverts. Some of them will learn about it because the big signs that the games have it on. Others will see an ad on telly, et cetera, et cetera. But the piece that's really important is the final thing they'll do is they'll go out on the internet, because it's only online betting that's legalized, and they will say DraftKings, FanDuel. And when they do that, if we can be in the top of that carousel somewhere, our target market is 35 billion over 5 years, so 7 billion a year. Somewhere in that conversation, if we can be relevant and pick up some sort of market share, it's so much money that you don't need to think about it as 0.5% or 1%. We've never put it in a presentation. We've just said we're very good at capturing people's eyeballs. We have a track record at being the best. Not saying we're going to be the best again, but we were very, very good at it, way ahead of any competition. And we got bought by one of the largest media companies in the world and made them more money, and we made it in sports betting. Odds are we're going to figure this stuff out for America. Some percentage of that we're going to grab. Could be zero, could be 100, likely neither, probably somewhere in between, and we hope for more every day. And so our single mission when you join the company is, how do we become relevant as the voice of sports betting in America? That's all. Because you know that the big number part of it is solved for. So the economics work. We also know that building a sports media brand, the way we build it, is a $10 to $20 million mission in terms of cost. It's not a $500 million mission or $5 billion mission. We've built it before. We've become the loudest voice and the largest voice and the most respected voice. Worked with the best teams. Worked with the Olympics, et cetera, et cetera. We've owned that space at the highest level. We know how to do it with still quality, but also quantity. And so we're reassured there, and we know the economics of multiple billions matches up with a couple tens of millions, highly, highly in our favor. The other thing that helps is that America is one of the last markets in the world to legalize. So China isn't legalized, India isn't legalized, America isn't legalized, Brazil isn't legalized. But ignoring the non-English speaking territories, this is a cashed up country. It's been legalized nationwide, state by state. They're figuring out their own way through. the tailwind momentum's phenomenal, but we also have the learnings of 20 years of our peers. And so we know that what their margins in the long term look like. And the long term margins of my peers is over 60%. A well run group is over 80% profit margins to the bottom line. That's a net profit margin, cash every month coming in with very little capex. Handbags. So handbags are a similar economic model, and the way I explain it to my mom is, okay, mom, your friend owns a bunch of real estate. She's built this empire over her life, right? She's an 80-year-old kind of going, I own 3 flats, and isn't it great? I can live off of the rent. And she spent her, this is a friend of hers who spent her whole life on that. And I said, Mom, imagine if the value of those flats, let's call it $1 million, was her rental check that she was receiving from the renters every year. I'm blown away. Oh my God, $1 million a year, that'd be amazing. They get like 80 grand. I'm like, 80 grand's pretty decent. That's an 8% return. On handbags, through subscription, we have 100% return on capex per year. So with that, you have massive margin. And because we have massive margin, we can then run an organization that isn't only efficient, knows everything about its customers. Our customers on average visit every 2 weeks. So versus a luxury brand that sees its customers, I would say every 14 months, we're seeing them every 2 weeks. So their preferences, their search terms, what they liked, when they returned it, how they used it, we know that intimately. So we have better information than our suppliers and our competition. We have a better price point because we're renting, and the economics of that, as I just went through with you, is a fraction of the cost of buying a bag. But the third thing is we can offer 1,500 bags for the same price as one on your shoulder. And in times of uncertainty, you don't want to buy the one bag that you love now, because 2 weeks later there might be COVID. 4 weeks later, your country might get invaded. 8 months later, that handbag might have some weird social media thing on it that you didn't want to happen. You're right. You're now representing a brand you didn't believe in. You got this thing on your shoulder. Now you're trying to sell it on eBay, but nobody wants it because nobody wants to be associated with that brand, right? So the flexibility and the liquidity in our market is perfect. And if you move that forward to why now, those same things I just answered would have existed 25 years ago. But what's happened is up the plane of luxury has happened resale, pre-owned, etc. So that the examples I've given you would have been as good as they were 25 years ago. But the piece that's not true, and someone who's very sophisticated in this space would have challenged me and said, is, Matt, actually, most of those business questions can be answered in the aftermarket, like selling something on eBay, something on Depop, et cetera, et cetera. And a board member of ours is the founder of Depop, and he said that Cocoon is the natural step for Depop. And I said, why? And he said, there's no binding tape, there's no disappointment, there's no I ordered that bag and got this one, there's no vit on the end going, well, you know what, I still like my hoodie, Matt. I know I sold it to you, but I think I'm going to keep it. And I'm like, my party is tomorrow night, Vit. I need the hoodie. Vit's just going, sorry, pal, you didn't get the hoodie. And so these peer-to-peer kind of slight competitors, or maybe like building block companies towards to get to a luxury subscription service, have been helpful to the company, and that it's shaped consumer behavior. But really what's nailed it is that we are the natural evolution in the luxury space.
And that's awesome. And you also a global first entrepreneur who has started businesses in various countries, right? Various business in various industries in various countries. And that's awesome. So in one of your interviews, you also stressed the value of teamwork. You even quoting Steve Jobs to emphasize this point. So how do you encourage teamwork culture within your companies when your core teams, as far as I understood, are spread out across different countries?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that because I take it for granted. I think my parents, used to say to me something I didn't understand at all, which was, you're in London starting businesses. You have no idea how difficult that is. And I thought to myself, I don't find it that difficult. I just find it the way it is. And that, that was going back over 20 years. And so I think that some of those cultural issues or regulatory issues or some of the way that people are engendered to think, that to me is intrigue. And it can be, if it's flipped from being a something that is a barrier to actually, you know what, that's incredibly valuable. If we all share the same mission, but we share it from a different point of view, now we have a very powerful thing.
Okay, but in today's world, diversity and inclusion are important, right? But let's also talk about diversity in global perspective. Do you believe that future companies should be global by default from the start, where nationality or even specific location takes a back seat on to one's skills and contributions? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think if you look at it historically, it's been tricky because there's regulatory issues or there's you know payment issues. Both of those things have gone away now. So that's gone from very a lot of friction to perfectly flat. And because it's gone perfectly flat, there's this wonderful opportunity to access skills that were inaccessible before. So it's perhaps the most valuable thing that you can do is find. I mean, it's like finding a gold mine that was just overly regulated and people couldn't pull it out because they didn't speak the same language as the guy operating the major machine. Now everybody speaks the same language and the regulatory barriers have dropped. That gold mine's worth a fortune. So I guess from a knowledge-based industry person's point of view, the gold mine that's out there is immense.
And you also highlighted the crucial role education plays in creating this fair business environment, which I totally agree with. But do you believe that improved education in global hiring or global this business growth could significantly benefit entrepreneurs and executives of different businesses, not only from the tax space perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I think this mad event kind of shaped my knowledge of that going back about 20 years. I was sitting on the sofa with my roommate who's much younger than me. He was actually my friend's kid. And he said, what do you want to listen to? And they said, well, I don't know. What do you got on iTunes? And he was like, no. Ignore that. What do you want to listen to? And I said, I'd love to listen to like Sasha Digweed, 1997, this really specific recording. The album art looks like this. And he just went into Google, bam. And he said, is this it? I said, yeah. And then he went onto LimeWire, just cut, pasted off of that search term, went into LimeWire, pressed play. The story takes longer to tell than the music took to come on the speakers. Probably took about 5 to 7 seconds. My story's probably taken about 30 seconds to tell. What I realized is that it's less about formal education. It's less about saying, "Oh, what album do you have on the on your bookshelf?" It's more about saying, "What are you interested in?" Can you access somebody with curiosity and some training and some experience, and to say how how quick, how much value add, and how well you're going to work integrating that into the organization are you? I don't care if they're 90 or they're 9. I don't care where they come from, or as long as they can communicate. That's those are the valuable pieces of input into the organization.
And as a global first entrepreneur, what challenges do you still face in this international business expansion, international hiring, that you would like to see solved by someone else?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about having two organizations that feel like they're quite different. So the Game Day, which is in digital media, Cocoon, which is in luxury handbags. And what's been an education for me in Cocoon is there's like a bag that needs to get to someone. And so a lot of that within the UK is very flat and deliverable as a luxury experience. Luxury in the UK has been around for about 20, 25 years, broken through by a friend of mine where we shared a CTO in the early 2000s. So I've seen that fluidity improve and improve. But you're asking the global question, and to me, if I can get a document to someone that needs a wet signature in New York later today and back later tonight, I should be able to get them a handbag. The two are not different. If I could get something to a party in Moscow or a party in Beijing and have it back to like I could get it there today, I could have it back Tuesday for sure at some point. Planes fly that loop. They should be a Cocoon member. And so what I think about is if you just take that, the world will solve for the problems that I've just put in front of you, and they're multiple because it's a hard good, but the world will solve to that. And demand is already solved for the global luxury play in the form of Farfetch. Farfetch is a listed company. When it was private, it was a well-known secret that basically they were an arbitrage model for Chinese to bring in luxury brands into China without paying duty because they weren't landing until they were at someone's home. So, they built a hell of a business off of arbitrage. Now that, the world's caught up to them and it's having a bit of a tough run of it, but they managed to build a hell of an organization in between. So I think the idea here is, how do we have partners who should be motivated to solve for some of those real world, real good friction problems? And my faith is they will. There's a large organizations and industries that are highly motivated to make sure that the world is a global luxury market. So I think that piece can be solved for. The reason it's so interesting to me and so frictioned versus global media is that everybody can watch the game day tomorrow who lives outside China. Just press play. And so in the media space, it's unlimited in terms of the ability to access a global market. And there are so many tools at our disposal, whether they be able to geo-lock content if it's not regulated in a state or a country. It takes it's a checklist on a CRM platform. It's probably easier than logging into this phone call. And so the friction it's there, but I mean, it's maybe 30 seconds of someone's time, maybe 15 seconds, and you have a global audience. And so I think that, the two things to me, I'm an interesting person to ask that question to.
And probably my last question to you: the business landscape is changing fast, right? Fueled by AI technologies, right? Especially in the media era, and this potential economic downturns. Uh, but still, real entrepreneurs usually see the shifts as opportunities rather than challenges, right? So, in your view, what do you think might be the next promising market with real money in it?
Yeah, I think, if I can just correct you slightly, I think on entrepreneurs, people think about it like really top down, like somebody who's sort of shouting from the top. But I think, if I'm just halfway through the Elon Musk book, and I think what he really has is he is shouting down from the top, and they're all kind of quotable tweets and moments in time. But what he has is this incredible nexus of people who are solving problems and bringing entrepreneurship at a high exec level and a middle management level. And I think where he feels the frustration and feels like he needs to get shouty is when that entrepreneurship and that innovation layer sucks away and he gets admin answers rather than innovative answers. And so I think my answer to you is going to be quite different than most entrepreneurs who want to be kind of shouty and leadership at the top and visionaries, quote unquote. My answer will be on AI already. Around 6 months ago, we changed how we make all our videos at the game day. And things that used to take 2 hours, a video that used to take 2 hours to edit now takes 4 minutes through AI. How is that so possible? Because they're common formats, right? Chunk, chunk, chunk. Imagine Friends, right? You're an editor editing Friends. Well, you got to get the Joey laugh and the ha 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 and then this and that. Well, after doing a couple hundred of those, the machine can spit out the next one very effectively. And so we're at that stage where it can spit it out. Now the editor has 30, 40 minutes on his hands. After he's done his first cup of coffee, what's he going to do? What he can do is add extreme value and be the real creative he wants to be on top of that. Or on our stills, so we really only make stills and video. So the whole company's now been affected. On stills, we take the initial image that we want, and then we throw it through AI with keywords thrown on top, and we just keep iterating that and iterating that until we get the image that we want. And that kind of thing is phenomenal in terms of upscaling, really, knowledge within the individuals that we're working with every day. So what would they say, right? To take the non-yelling down analogy and to say, okay, from the bottom up, what really is the opportunity? And I think the opportunity for me is organizations that are going to learn to use these skills and use AI as a tool are really going to flip to the forefront. And so I guess the analogy I gave the other day on a panel, was I was kind of questioned on the value of the game day as a franchise. Like, once you publish your story, can't 10,000 other sites just do that same story? AI can add some clever sort of quotes around it, and suddenly you're done. And I said, my eldest daughter's 10, and I think next year when she starts submitting essays, the teacher has a tool that I've heard about that just filters for AI based essays. And so certainly if her, at that age, 11 English teacher can filter for plagiarism. Google, which has been doing plagiarism for 25 years, can filter for plagiarism. And so I think what we're going to have is a layer of people who are chasing to the lowest common denominator using AI. And then you're going to have people who are saying, actually, I can use this to create greatness. And so I would imagine really the industries that can create greatness are going to be the ones that most benefit. So let me give you a really boring example: law, right? It's in everyone's crosshairs now that they think that law is just going to be AI'd out of existence. Having worked on a major legal case myself recently, about 2 years ago, the opposition was a major corporate. It was scary. But the law team that I had was the best in the UK, if not the world. And the reason they were the best is they architectured the case out from day one, had all the materials from me in day one, full disclosure, and then executed on what they'd architected out. And when they architected it, they found a way through to a data point that they know if the opposition got there, their position was then untenable. And that doesn't, a machine isn't going to get you there. And what a machine's going to do is say, here's the information I have in front of me. Here's where this thing's going to land on a percentage point. They move the percentage points. I remember the same person I talked about mentoring me at the Royal Bank of Canada, and she said, Matt, I don't really know if investment banking is going to be around and lucrative in 10 or 20 years' time. A lot of this is going to be automated. And it was nice of her to give me that warning shot. But I think what people don't realize is that when you're pitching in the room, if you say to a company it's worth, say, 10 billion, I can move your stock price. I can add value so it's worth 11, or I can at least try. And here's our precedents for doing that. And this is what we've achieved. And this is why we've done it. And this is all the backfill that says we're going to move you from 10 billion to 11 billion. Now, we might charge you 100 million for that, which seems expensive because we're a bunch of guys in suits. It's 100 million bucks, but we're worth a billion. And so I think that really what I'm trying to say is human capital is moving things a billion, and tools and machines are moving things maybe 100 million. But the journey is who can add that billion, and who are you going to back in whatever industry it might be. I've given you banking and legal because they're very boring. But from those very boring examples, now you can get to be a bit of a dreamer and think actually there's more opportunity than ever.
That's true. That's true. Okay, I guess we're good. So, thanks a lot, Matt, for sharing your entrepreneurial journey and wisdom with us. Today, we covered a lot of things: the importance of choosing the right market, this teamwork across different global borders. So, thanks a lot. And I must say, we're so excited to see what's next for you in the game day and like other ventures that you're working on. Thank you.
Thanks, Vic. I appreciate it. Nice to connect.